Welcome. Welcome to the 12th Annual University Lecture Series. My name is Brent Iverson. I'm the Dean of the School of Undergraduate Studies, and it's my privilege to introduce our speakers tonight. The University Lecture Series is designed to create a conversation, and we pick topics that are going to be relevant not only to your lives, but also your time at the university. What we're going to hear about today is all different aspects of a growth mindset and what that really does or doesn't mean. But I want you to think about it like this. You're all going to enter a world after the 40 acres that is defined by having only one constant, and that constant is going to be change. You're going to have to figure out how to prepare for that. Let me just give you a few ideas of what I'm talking about. It turns out today's 48-year-olds have changed jobs about 12 times already, and they're not done. You are probably going to change jobs more than that by the time you're 48. Chances are you're going to change careers. And I think this is the best prediction of all. Most of you will probably retire from jobs that have not been invented yet. So the question is, how do you prepare for that? And the speakers today are going to address different ways that you can use your time at the 40 acres to get ready. Now, before I introduce them, a quick note. The organization Register to Vote will be outside after the lecture. We would like you, or encourage you, everyone who's eligible, to sign up to vote. The last day to do so is October 9th. So please stop by after the lecture. All right, tonight's first speaker is Dr. Robert Crosnoe. Dr. Crosnoe is a professor and chair in the Department of Sociology and currently is the president of the Society for Research on Adolescence. Dr. Crosnoe.
How y'all doing? Good? Okay, I'm going to start off by telling you something that I have in common with all of you, every one of you, which is that a long time ago, I'm not going to tell you how long ago, I was a freshman here at the University of Texas. And, yep, it's true. And now I'm going to tell you something that some of you, maybe a lot of you, have in common with me, which is that I came here from a small town public high school where the academic competition was not exactly intense. And so over the years of making really good grades without having to try all that hard, I just developed this idea in my head that I had it, that I was smart. And because I was smart, I was going to do great no matter where I went. So you see where this is going, right? 1, 2, 3 months at the University of Texas, and I got my ass handed to me academically. It was a horror show. It was totally bloody. And in that scenario, my first response was to think, maybe I don't have it after all. In fact, maybe I'm kind of dumb. And let me tell you, there is no bigger problem for a college student, especially at a place like the University of Texas, as thinking that you're dumb. But fortunately, something happened. And it's something that's going to happen, I promise you, to you while you're here on the 40 acres, which is that a very good and very caring professor saw something in me and threw me a lifeline. She called me into her office and said, "What's going on, man?" And I said, I was very all dramatic and with a lot of embellishment, told her all the things I was feeling. And she said, calm down. And then she asked me 2 questions that really had a huge effect on me. Simple questions, but they had a huge effect. The first one was, how hard did you actually try? What did you actually put into that last assignment? And I said, I tried harder than anybody has ever tried ever before on anything. And after a little conversation, we got down to the real answer, which was not enough, or at least not a lot. And the second question was, why didn't you come ask me for help? And I had no response to that question. So in this conversation, she got me out of my own head and got me thinking less about things like having it or not having it, and more about the balance between challenges and effort, between independence and help-seeking. And I was on my way with that new way of thinking. And that new way of thinking, it would be many, many years before I knew it had a name. And that name was growth mindset. Now, growth mindset, or the ideas behind it, were developed over many, many years by a lot of people, but especially an eminent Stanford psychologist named Carol Dweck. And in its simplest form, growth mindset just means the belief that your intellectual capacities can be developed over time. Right? That's what it means. We often use a muscle metaphor to sell what growth mindset means, which is this. Your brain is like a muscle, and just like you have to go over to the gym and lift weights to make your muscles stronger, you have to engage in some hard work to grow your brain. You can grow your brain. And that simple understanding of growth mindset is very effective, but it's too simple because there's a lot more going on. The biggest problem that people have is thinking that having a growth mindset just means believing in your own abilities, believing that your brain can grow. There's a lot more to it. There's the effort that you have to put into that, the strategies you have to develop to grow your brain, the help that you need to get it done, and the opportunities that you have to grow your brain like that. All of those things are important, and when you combine them together, that translates into a willingness or even an eagerness to go out and find challenges that you're going to try to meet head on. And when you're challenge seeking, you are going to do better academically, and you're going to learn more over time. And those basics of the growth mindset process have been backed up by hundreds and hundreds of psychological experiments. And they typically work like this. You have a group of kids, high school students, college students, you separate them, randomly assign them to two groups, the treatment group and the control group. The treatment group gets some lesson about growth mindset. We tell you what it is. We tell you how it works. We really hit hard on that effort and help-seeking part of the message too. And the control group, they don't get anything. We do some stuff for them, but they don't get the growth mindset intervention. Then we follow those two groups over time. And if the treatment group does better academically than the control group, we can say that that was caused by their growth mindset, that the growth mindset intervention worked. And there's a lot of evidence that it really did work. And that's why you hear about growth mindset in the media. That's why it's taught in high schools from Miami to Omaha to Anchorage and all of those points in between. And that's why people like to talk about it. But in all that hoopla, there's also some very important criticisms about growth mindset that you need to know and you need to remember. And I'm just going to share two of those. The first one is really a practical matter, and it's just that all those experiments I told you about were done on these really small samples that didn't have a lot of diversity. And so we really don't know, can this intervention scale up? Is it applicable? Will it have benefits for diverse groups of people attending different kinds of schools? Those are really important questions, and we don't know the answers to them. The second criticism is more substantive. It's the blaming the victim criticism, and it goes like this. Growth mindset seems to make so much out of you and what you're doing and what you're thinking, and maybe less about the context you're living your life and all the constraints that might be on you and the opportunities you might have. So it doesn't really, or there's a perception that it doesn't really get into things like, do you have good teachers or not? Do you have involved parents or not? Do you go to a safe or unsafe school? All of those things that really do affect your performance, even if you do have growth mindset. So there's a perception that it ignores inequality, that it ignores structure, it ignores threat, and all of those things. And that's why a lot of sociologists, and I'm a sociologist, just aren't having it. They just don't like it. And so into all of this criticism steps a UT psychologist named David Yeager. And he's a professor here on campus. He is very young, he is very talented, and so I have a nickname for him. Do you want to know what the nickname is? The Baby Genius. And the Baby Genius was a student of Carol Dweck's, and he's really involved in growth mindset research, and he really believes that growth mindset is a tool that you all can use to do better, and that schools like your high school or UT can really use to improve our overall performance. Really believes that. So he pushed this idea that we needed to have a national evaluation of a growth mindset intervention on student academic performance. So we could see, does it scale up? Is it generalizable to different kinds of students in different kinds of schools and different kinds of communities? And that was a great idea. It was also a massive and very expensive undertaking. So he joined forces with two sociologists here on campus to get this done. One of them is my colleague named Chandra Muller. She's amazing. And the other one is me. And we, compared to the baby genius, are not young and probably a lot less talented, but we know how to run national studies and we know how to get things done. So the three of us, plus Carol Dweck, plus a number of scientists on the Mindset Scholars Network, all joined forces and launched the National Study of Learning Mindsets, with 12,000 high school students, 12,000 ninth graders in 76 schools all across the country, including a couple here in Texas. So I imagine some of you went to one of these schools. And it was an experiment, so we randomly assigned treatment group and control group. The treatment group got a growth mindset lesson from people like Michelle Obama and LeBron and people like that. It was really good. And then we waited to see what happened. And the psychologists on the team, they really wanted to show that there was an overall effect of this intervention, because they're invested in this message. They're invested that this is something that can work. And they were right, it did. The kids who got that mindset intervention, who got that growth mindset message, they were the ones who scored better on challenge-seeking tests. By the end of 9th grade, they had better grades. And by the start of 10th grade, they were in higher level math, right? All good things. Now, the sociologists like me on the team, we wanted to see something different. We wanted to see that the effects or the benefits of this growth mindset varied across schools and varied across kids, because we really believe that context matters. And we were right too. There was a lot of variation. I'm just going to give you one example. The effects of the mindset intervention were a lot weaker in the most academically rigorous high schools, because those students had all sorts of advantages. And they were pretty weak in the least academically rigorous high schools, because those students had so many obstacles in their path. In all the schools in the middle between those two extremes, it worked, and it worked really well. So there has to be the right kind of mixture of advantages or obstacles for mindset to really have its effects. And that's why we call it the Goldilocks effect. Now, what I just said is much more pronounced if you're in a school where your peers really care about doing well in school and they're really academically oriented. So it's having the mindset, but it's also about where you are and who you're surrounded with. So all of this evidence made me move from being a doubter to a believer. But here's the takeaway message. Growth mindset is not a magic bullet. It's a resource. And it's a resource that works for kids in need, especially when it's combined with other kinds of resources. It's not the solution, it is part of a solution, but an important one. So here's where I pause, and I'm going to tell you a secret. Do you want to hear a secret? Okay, so don't tell anybody. It's between me and you and the television cameras. I have two kids, they're in middle school, and their schools had growth mindset curricula last year, and I was like kind of humble bragging to the principals, like, well, you know, I'm an expert on this if you need any help or anything. So both my kids failed the growth mindset evaluation or the test. I swear. I don't mean like they got a 78. I mean they got Fs on the growth mindset lesson. So because I have a growth mindset, I can learn from my mistakes. And I've learned from my mistakes. And here's what I learned. I need to spend a lot less time selling this growth mindset message to all of you and a lot more doing it at home with my own kids. And that's what I'm going to do right now after I tell you one final thing. And that final thing is this. As you move on to navigate the next 4 years of your life here at the University of Texas, there's going to be a long road ahead of you, and there's going to be a lot of bumps along the way. But here at Texas, we have students who believe in themselves, believe in the power of taking on challenges and growing from them. And we have faculty who really believe it's their jobs to scaffold you as you meet those challenges. And it's that combination is why what happens here changes the world. Welcome.
Thank you, Rob. Our next speaker tonight is Dr. Keffrelyn Brown. She's a professor of cultural studies in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. She is the Elizabeth Glenadine Gibb Teaching Fellow in Education and holds additional appointments in the Department of African and African Diaspora Studies, the John L. Warfield Center for African and African American Studies, and the Center for Women and Gender Studies. Dr. Brown.
So good evening, everyone. You all can say good evening. Thank you. You're the largest class I've ever taught. So I admit it. I love the beginning of a school year. Before I meet my classes and begin teaching, I am excited and anxious. I am hopeful my students will grow and expand what they know and can do. But if I am truthful, I also worry that I will fail as a teacher and not provide a dynamic, impactful space for my students to learn. Now, you might think this is too audacious of a goal for me to hold, but it is the only worthy goal for a teacher to have. And at the heart, I'm a teacher, but I'm also a researcher and scholar of teaching and teacher education. So I'm used to these conflicted feelings, and I use them to keep me focused on the top of my teaching game. When I assume I have perfected my craft, I face the risk of becoming a stale and complacent teacher. Now, this journey to embrace my identity as a learner who takes risks to go deeper with my learning was not an easy one. There was a time when I, contrary to Robert Frost, took the easiest road and not the one less traveled. Now, is there anyone in the audience currently traveling on that road? When I was in your seat, I exerted the least amount of effort needed to complete my work. Some people refer to this as working smart rather than working hard. Now, early in my career, like many other teachers and academics, I was afraid of looking like I did not know something. When the world looks at you as an expert, it's often hard to admit that you don't know everything. Yet the best teachers and scholars understand that to know something, you must remain curious and engaged. You always have to go deeper and seek to learn more. Now, this kind of learning is difficult and uncertain, but it also holds the potential to transform the learner. This kind of learning is audacious. It is palpable and often life-changing. So tonight, I want to talk to you about what I call an audacious mindset. An audacious mindset is my sort of word to describe a way of thinking that anyone can adopt, and I hope that everyone in this room will adopt. It extends from the idea of a growth mindset, which you all got a great overview of just a moment ago, and an idea that was made popular by psychologist Carol Dweck. A growth mindset views smartness as an attainable goal and something that anyone can achieve. Smartness is not a fixed trait that a person either has or does not. A growth mindset asks people to see themselves as always having the potential to achieve. My idea of an audacious mindset extends from this to describe an ideal learner stance. So how should you stand and orient yourself toward your learning? It asks us to consider the difference between learning to achieve and learning to transform. When we dive deep in our learning, and when that learning is difficult, uncertain, or seems at first glance maybe even irrelevant, we show an audacious mindset. And I would argue that this is essential for our personal development and our ability to make a difference. So I want to share a story. As an undergraduate, I met an amazing professor. Have you experienced this yet? And if you haven't, I hope that you have the opportunity to meet one of the many, many amazing professors here at UT Austin. He knew his content, which was political science, and he also inspired me to want to learn and to become a professor. After several months, he observed my work habits and my classroom performance. I asked, could I meet with him? I wanted to ask about his decision to become a professor. and I was looking for insight into my own future. I thought that I could learn a lot from his example. At the meeting, he made a comment that shocked me and changed my life forever. He told me that my prior schooling did not prepare me to think critically about the world and my place within it. And then he looked me straight in the eye, mustered up all the sarcasm he could, and suggested that I appeal to the state to get my parents' money back because my schooling had failed me. Ouch, right, you can laugh. I mean, it was sad. Now, this statement shocked and it jarred me, but it also led me down a path of personal reflection and self-discovery. I knew that I had held a lackadaisical attitude towards schooling, but my family and teachers generally viewed me as a bright, capable, and good student, and I thought that my professor had seen that in me as well. I was compliant. I completed my work with ease and had no problems discussing in class. I could regurgitate the knowledge I read in a book or heard in a lecture back on an assignment or in a class discussion. But when my professor said my schooling had failed me, he made an important distinction between going to school and receiving an education. I was unfamiliar with this contrast. Bright, good students went to school to perform well, and they did so to please those around them, parents and teachers, or to receive an external reward, a gold star, a good grade, a diploma, a college acceptance, an internship, a well-paying job. I, like other good students, were successful in getting schooled, but fell woefully short in seizing an education. Now, I'm going to show my age. Growing up in Houston, I often heard basketball players tell each other, "You got schooled." Now, make no doubt about it, getting schooled is not a good thing on the court. It means that you thought you knew how to play the game, but you lost. And someone else had to show you how to really play the game. Getting schooled meant you were in the game, but the game passed you by because you couldn't translate mediocre or competent skills into brilliance. So let's apply the metaphor of getting schooled to learning in school. The problem with getting schooled is that while it requires some effort, it also lulls us into thinking we've accomplished something when we haven't. And the joke ends up being on us, not the school or those working in the school. Getting schooled means that you go through the motions of learning. You may go to school, you may do the basic things expected of you, but when you fail to engage, or go deep into what you are learning, you fail. You fail to transform or see and think about your work in a different way. School keeps on going, but you become nothing more than you were before you arrived. But what makes it possible for us to get schooled? What are the barriers that prevent deep learning and engagement in school? I offer 3 with the hopes that you will reflect on whether you have found yourself ever feeling these ways about your experiences in school. Now, the first is jumping through hoops. In practice, this sounds like, I want to go to school and just get out. This perspective might also play out when a student fails to take seriously their non-major courses. Now, the problem with this jumping through the hoops idea is that it encourages a passive approach to learning. Education scholar Paulo Freire refers to this as banking education, where teachers pour knowledge into their students' heads, or they attempt to do so. Freire says, implicit in the banking concept is the assumption of a dichotomy between human beings and the world. A person is merely in the world, not with the world or with others. The individual is a spectator, not a recreator. In a banking education, there is no exchange, questioning, or dialogue between students, teachers, and course content. The second barrier is feeling stressed and burned out. Have you ever felt this way? And I imagine you may have. Do you feel this way tonight? Ready to leave this lecture so you can go home and finish your homework for tomorrow? Probably. All right, that's fine. You might say, I have too much on my plate. I need to do the least amount of work to pass. And I know your generation faces increased pressure to do more than people have done in the past. And with so much pressure, it is easy to become stressed and burned out. It takes energy to be present and not get overwhelmed with the demands of life. But we ask that you stay engaged, right? You need to stay engaged. Now, the final barrier is different from the others, and it's one that I actually encounter as a teacher in my courses sometimes. I teach course content that some people find difficult to engage, okay? And they often will show resistance to learning that knowledge because it runs counter to what they already think they know about the world. So in my courses, we talk about issues of race, culture, and difference. We think about how these impact teaching and curriculum. Now, this is new content for many students. Many have not encountered these topics, particularly from a research and theory-informed perspective. So they often assume that the course is based on my personal passion or my opinions about race. And as a result, some students express not wanting to talk about these kinds of topics. They don't want to engage in these kinds of courses because it makes them question or ask questions about things that they would rather not deal with. They like who they are, they believe what they believe, and they don't want to change. Now, when you resist learning, you actually close off perspectives that can widen your worldview and help you see something hidden or unrecognizable before. The world we inhabit is complex and diverse, and you cannot impact it by choosing not to see, learn about, and engage in that world because of its challenges. So I'm going to tell you another story. When I started my PhD program, I knew exactly what I wanted to study and mapped out a plan for completion. I worked hard and threw myself into my studies because I wanted to become a strong researcher. But my plan did not encourage deep curiosity. That was too risky for completing my timeline. If I was willing to coast by as an undergraduate, which I told you about a few minutes ago, as a graduate student, I developed hyperfocus and discipline. But that hyperfocus and discipline cut off the possibility of discovery. My doctoral advisor immediately saw how driven I was to become a strong scholar, and he also recognized my fears of letting go and opening up to learn unexpected knowledge. To produce impactful knowledge, I needed to become a curious and adventurous learner. And with time, I did ease up, let go of my rigid, mapped-out plan that left no room for unexpected learning, and my research interests evolved to focus on how race and culture operated in K-12 teaching and curriculum practices, which is not what I went to graduate school to study. Now, what this story conveys are some elements that teacher education research knows students need in order to become deep learners. The first is openness. This signals a willingness to learn by creating a space to seek out new ideas and perspectives. But it also asks us to be vulnerable, right, about the uncertainty and change that deep learning is going to bring. Curiosity. You must have a curious mind that's open and excited to learn. It initiates asking questions and it roots out answers, even in spaces that you might not think are important to your area. If you're in that space, if you're at this lecture, you might as well try to find a piece of information that can really help you, right? Engagement. One cannot ask questions without taking up an intentional engagement to learn. Engaged learners are mindful and present to learning. So I'm going to stop by this road and give a little PSA. Whether in class or in a study session, learners that engage stay in the moment of learning and not on their phones or social media, especially while in class. Hopefully you're not doing that except to tweet out something great and profound that someone has said in here tonight. Fearlessness. Taking risks as a learner means stretching beyond your comfort zone. Whether it's deciding to take a course that is challenging or engaging with content that is new or uncomfortable, you must be willing to take a risk. Avril Seal, in a 2017 feature article in the UT Texas X's magazine, the alcade, of which all of you are going to get eventually because you're going to graduate, right? Discuss the history of one word that was best used to describe UT Austin. And that word was audacious. The audaciousness of UT Austin is the legacy you all inherit. To believe you can change the world, you have to, in fact, be audacious. If we are to make a difference, and that difference starts here, as our university's audacious motto, "What starts here changes the world," tells us, what you start must be deep. It requires setting a strong and lasting foundation, and this begins with having an open, curious, engaged, and fearless approach to learning. Now, no one said this would be easy, and as my own personal stories have illustrated, it isn't. But in the words of the GOAT, and for those of you who are not hip, that stands for the greatest of all time, tennis phenom Serena Williams, right? And she really is the GOAT, but anyway, okay. It's about taking one moment at a time and trying to master those moments. Be audacious, transform you, and change the world. Thanks.
Okay, our final speaker tonight is Dr. Robert Duke. Bob Duke has taught at UT for over 30 years. He's the Marlene and Morton Meyerson Centennial Professor and the head of Music and Human Learning and the director of the Center for Music Learning at the Butler School of Music. He is also a clinical professor at the Dell Medical School. But those of you who listen to KUT are also probably well aware that he is one of the two guys on your head. Bob.
Thanks. Thanks, Brent. Thank you all for coming tonight, and let me thank Dean Iverson and all the staff in UGS for setting this up so beautifully, and for my lovely colleagues who I got to be inspired by tonight. I think somebody has to get my slides up there, so I don't know if Patty's doing this. You know, all the ideas about being audacious, which I just love that idea, and actually believing that you can improve yourself and change if you put forth effort and strategically use the time you have to do things that are productive, requires you to actually do certain things. And I think a lot of us, when we first begin school, find ourselves thinking about, well, what am I good at? And who decides that? Well, often we have an experience in a class and it doesn't go well. We think, well, I must not be good at that. And then we find something else to be good at. And I want to suggest to you that now you're at this place where there are people all over this campus who are literally the most interesting, productive, successful people in their respective disciplines. And I invite you to talk to them and meet them and spend time with them beyond just the idea of whether I do well in that class or not. Let me see if I can get all these things to work here. Here we go. I'm going to play a video that takes about 2 minutes long, so you can adjust your attention spans accordingly, and we'll talk about it after it's over. There's no sound. We'll start again. I could sing. There's still no sound. I might skip this video. I know, come on.
Sing.
Okay, I'm going to go to this. I'll come back to him. We're all very fortunate to have this 3 pounds of goo in our heads. This is the most complicated machine in the known universe. Current estimations, there are 86 billion neurons, that's billions with a B, in a typical human brain. This is a remarkable machine, and it requires certain things to learn. One thing that doesn't promote learning is what you're doing right now. We often imagine that this is a learning environment where some ostensibly knowledgeable person is telling you stuff, and then you're learning because you're listening. And actually, that's not where learning starts. Learning starts when you start to generate things on your own. Now, there are a lot of things involved in that, because when you generate something on your own and you're not quite sure what you're doing, you're likely to make mistakes. And actually, it's those mistakes that actually lead to learning. We've used metaphors throughout human history to describe thinking and memory in the human brain. And the current one is computers, right? We think our computer memory is kind of where our brain's kind of like that. So you're working at your computer, you hit the save command, your computer looks for a blank space on your drive, it writes what you saved, and by write I mean a bunch of binary switches flip from 1 to 0 to 0 to 1 in some configuration that represents what you saved, puts an address on it with the idea in mind that later that day, later that week, later that year, barring some malfunction or physical catastrophe of your computer, you'll click on the icon for that thing. Your computer will go find the address, read off what was on the drive, and it'll be just like it was when you put it there. Now, when we think about brains like that, organic brains like that, we're so off the mark. Because all of you right now, what your brains are doing right now is trying to figure out what this experience has to do with things that are already in your head. So everybody in this room, even though we're having a shared experience, there's one person talking, most of you are listening, that in that experience, every one of you is having a different experience because you brought different memories with you when you came into the room. Now that's an important thing to think about, because when you leave this room, what happens to you after this talk, whatever you do outside tonight, tomorrow, later in the week, will affect the memory for this talk. So memory is not a static thing like a computer. You don't put stuff in there and then you'll get it when you want it. Memory is a tremendously dynamic enterprise in organic brains, and we have to actually do certain things, not only to form memories, but also to update memories and refine memories. And the big part about this, which I see if I can get this thing to turn, I think I'm gonna give up on my slides here. I am. Okay, I'm gonna skip that too. God. Patty, I got nothing, sweetie. That's not gonna play. The sound, that's great. Okay, stop. You can probably tell from my voice I'm not from around here. I'm actually from the East Coast, but I've lived here for, as Dean Iverson said, for 30 years. And when I first came to Texas, one of the things I appreciated, I was so interested that Professor Brown talked about this, just the audacity of the place, you know? It's just amazing, you know? It's just like Texans, they're just like, we're just gonna do stuff, you know? And for those of you who watch Division I sports on television, you know that we've always had little 10-second clips when our teams play on national television to tout how cool our institutions are. I'm going to play you just a little clip that we used to play in the 90s that I pulled off the web because it was so cool, and we don't play it anymore. I wish we did, but I want you to see it.
We don't claim to be able to change the world. We just change people. And then they change the world. We're Texas.
Now, come on. Who doesn't want to go to school here? I mean, come on. Steel guitar, that was Walter Cronkite's voice. Many of you might know he was once called the most trusted man in America. We have breakfast tacos, it's great. I just love the audacity of that. We just change people, and then they change the world. We just bring them here, and we change them, and then they go change the world. Now, I have to tell you, that change takes effort, not only on the part of faculty and the people who work to teach students about things, but also on the part of students as well. So you have a task to do here in terms of initiating things on your own that actually lead to developing your memory. Now, many of the things that you did to get you here in school actually didn't necessarily cultivate that kind of thinking. And I'm going to show you an example if I can get this slide to work, and maybe I will. Yes, I did. Good. Good God. Sorry, love. Okay. I'd like for you to solve that equation in your head. Don't say anything out loud. Just solve for x. Okay. There's like 1,000 people in here. Someone will raise your hand and volunteer an answer. Yeah, okay. I got to say, we got about 1,000 people in here. I got about 5 people raising their hands. Now, the question is, thank you for calling that out. The question is, for those of you who aren't ready to volunteer yet, that's an example of what's happened to you in school over the course of your school experience. When I first started teaching, I was a band and orchestra director in a school in Atlanta, Georgia. And I found out when I first got to my high school that the elementary school that was adjacent to my campus didn't have enough music teacher hours for the elementary and kindergarten and first grade children to have music. So I decided I would go to that school during my planning period once a week and teach kindergartners and first graders to do music. And I would roll my little cart with my music stuff on it into a room, and the kids would just go nuts. Wow, it's time for music. I said, what do you want to do? You want to sing? Yeah, we'll sing. Want to put on a record? Yeah, Beethoven, yeah, he's good. They were uninhibitedly, undiscriminatingly positive about anything I wanted to do. And I would pose a question in the class. I'd say, someone raise your hand for just a minute. And oh, everybody's hand went up. Then I'm going to ask. I don't care. Pick me, you know. And now I think those same children who were 5 and 6 years old when I met them have now grown up. And they've become my stressed, oppressed, grade-anxious graduate students. And now I'm sitting in a seminar room, and I look and say, well, someone talk for just a minute. And everybody looks at the table and thinking, God, don't call on me. I'm thinking, what happened to you? What took that bright, with it, pick me, I don't know what's going on, I'll try, and turns you into that? And the only common experience I can think ran through all their past experiences is they all went to school. And school turned that, like, well, yeah, you can applaud that. I'm with you. Now, the thing is, you can sort of complain about that and say, you know, I've been mistreated. Or you can say, you know what, I'm in college now. And I don't have to depend on the person at the front of the room to set up everything so I learn. I can actually take action on my part and learn. Now, I want to show you about what I'm looking at right here at this equation. Somebody said 3 over 2. Great, okay. And if I were to ask you, for all of you who didn't raise your hand, say, yeah, I knew that. If I were to ask you how you got from that to 3 over 2, or 1.5, how did you get there from there? Anybody have any thoughts about that? Yeah. A lot of people are doing this. This is a universal symbol for that equation, right? So you do that. Click the slide, Patty. Yeah, you do that, and then you do that, and then you reduce a fraction, and you get 1.5. Now, here's my question. Why do you do that? Why do you flip the thing over? Yeah, so, you know, the best answer I ever got for that, I was in a room full of 5th graders once, and I said, why do you invert the divisor in that equation? And a kid raised his hand and said, because if you don't, you get it wrong. What better rationale does one need than that? Now, I want to tell you, if your goal is to get the right answer, then that's all you need to know. And there's no commensurate requirement that you understand what the hell you're doing. But you'll still get the right answer. And so one of the things that a growth mindset, an audacious mindset, has to do with becoming a successful learner is not stopping when you get the right answer. Everything in school will reinforce your stopping when you get the right answer. But what you can ask is, why do you do that? What's that for? What's that about? And now you have a different way and a deeper way of understanding the things that you learn, that no professor required of you, that you required of yourself. Now that's something that you have the capacity to do. And I tell you, there are many, many, many wonderfully taught courses on our campus, but occasionally you're going to encounter a class that is not particularly inspiring to you. Now, after you find out after the first 2 weeks that this is a drag, you can either say to yourself, well, 13 more weeks to go, or you could say, what can I do? What can I do with my classmates to turn this into something that's going to be of value to me, even though I have to work harder to get that to happen? I'm going to show you one more little problem that I hope we can do. This is a puzzle I'm going to ask you to solve. And what I'm going to ask you to do as I explain this puzzle is not to talk and just think about this on your own, all right? And here's the puzzle. I have 9 identical cubes. They're sealed, you can't open them. They're 2 inches cube. They look the same, they feel the same. Everything about them is alike. But in one of those 9 cubes, there's a $100 bill. In the other 8 cubes, there's a wadded up piece of paper that's the size of a $100 bill, but it's just a blank piece of paper. And here's my hypothetical situation. If you can find out which cube has the $100 bill without opening it, you get to keep the $100 bill, hypothetically. Okay. So you think, well, how am I going to do that? I can't open the cubes. Well, there's a hint I'm going to give you. The paper that the $100 bill is printed on is slightly heavier than the blank pieces of paper in the other 8 cubes. So if you can detect which cube is heavier, you can identify which cube has a $100 bill. But the thing is, the difference between the $100 bill paper and the other paper is so slight that if you put the $100 bill cube in one hand, the paper cube in the other hand, your motor system wouldn't be able to detect the difference. So to help you solve the problem, I'm going to give you a balance scale to try and solve the problem. Good God. And the balance scale is just like a regular scale, except there's no numbers on it. The only thing it tells you is which side of the scale is heavier. So here's what makes this puzzle a challenge, right? You can put stuff on the scale and figure out where the heavier cubes are, but you can only use the scale twice. In other words, you can put some stuff on the scale, you can see what happens. You can put some stuff on the scale, you see what happens, and then that's it, you're done with the scale. Now, what I'm going to do right now is give you a full minute to not talk to anybody, really try to do this on your own and think about the answer to that puzzle. Okay, I'm going to start the minute now. Anybody know how to do it? If you do, don't say. Okay, we're just about a minute. We're a little bit short, but close. Now, I got to tell you, even though the lights are dark, as I'm looking around your faces, as I'm explaining this puzzle, this classroom is every classroom. Because some of you, if I explained the puzzle, had a look on your face like, I bet I can solve that. And others of you had a look on your face like, I don't think I can solve that. And others of you look like, this is stupid, I'm not going to try and solve that. So every classroom is represented here, right? Now, here's the thing. If you either know about this puzzle already or you tried and you actually solved it, right now you can't wait to tell somebody who didn't solve it what the answer is. And if you actually tried and you didn't solve it, you can't wait for somebody to explain it to you. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do. No matter which of those categories you're in, don't talk to anybody about this. Right? For those of you who know the solution, don't spoil it for the people who don't. For the people who don't know, don't spoil it for yourself by getting somebody to explain it to you. Now, I'm going to tell you, I gave a talk for all the new teachers in the Austin School District a couple summers ago. I don't know, I have a room this big with 1,200 teachers in it. I had this slide up, and I was ready to move on to the next slide, and this one teacher in the auditorium raised her hand, and I called on her. She said, what's the answer to the cube problem? I said, I'm not going to tell you. She was pissed. It's like, what do you mean? This is school. You give me a problem, and I work on it, and then I can't solve it, and you explain it to me. Well, why is that? Only because we're in a hurry, right? I'll end with this last story. I also put this slide up at another talk I gave at the University of Glasgow a couple of springs ago. And I was the first talk in the morning at the conference. I was explaining things similar to what I'm explaining to you tonight. I put this up, told them the problem, didn't solve it for them. At the end of the day, there was a little wine and cheese reception. These 4 graduate students walk up to me, a male and 3 females. And the guy walks up to me and says, hey, man, what's the answer to the cube problem? I said, I'm not going to tell you. He said, man, come on. I haven't heard a word anybody said all day. I'm just trying to solve this dumb problem. I said, look, I'm not going to tell you, but I'll ask you some questions about it. I said, what if you just put 1 cube on each side? He said, well, that's stupid. I mean, there's 7 more cubes. I said, well, don't go too quickly past that. I mean, what could you learn from that? And then before I could ask him the question, one of his 3 friends, who I later learned her name was Gemma, lovely Scottish name. Gemma goes, I got it. And the thing is, I couldn't give her that. There's no lucid explanation from me that would have done that for Gemma. And that's what you can give yourself, right? I mean, rather than saying, look, just tell me what the answer is. Just tell me how to solve the problem. Just tell me to invert and multiply, and I'll get it right. You will get it right, but you might not learn anything. And one of the things that all of us are challenging you to do, and I think our institution as an institution wants to challenge you to do, is not to have us push you to be better. It's you to push yourself to be better, because you have the wherewithal to do that. And all of us here at the institution, not just the faculty, but the staff and everybody involved in running this place, is committed to the idea of helping you become more successful, as Professor Iverson was saying, not just now while you're here on the 40 acres, but preparing you to be successful in wherever your life's paths take you. And I'm happy to be a part of that, and I'm very happy to get to talk to you tonight. And hook 'em. Thanks a lot.
Okay, we have some questions from the audience. First off, I want to say that I hope you really got the idea of what we're trying to say up here today. And what that is that you collectively are the best students in the state of Texas. It's our job to make it so you are the most successful people that will ever graduate from this institution. And quite frankly, our world needs you. So I'm going to start with just a question for you, Dr. Crosnoe. Do you think measuring growth mindset by tests and grades, which encourage short-term achievement over growth enforcement, creates a closed mindset? So in other words, okay.
Yes, I do, which is why the most important outcome of growth mindset interventions is not the test scores or the grades. It is these assessments we do where we basically give students math tests and they get to pick the questions that go on the math test that they're going to take. And we measure the questions by whether they're hard or easy. And guess what? If you have a growth mindset, you pick harder questions. That's the best way to do it. So people aren't caring about their grades or their test scores. They're caring about learning.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Brown, at what point, in other words, in what class were you in which you developed your growth mindset?
Wow. Probably my junior year in college, I took a course. It was a very, very challenging course with the professor that I told you all about. And it was the first time I had a professor ask me to read some data and to explain that data, what was going on, what were the patterns in that data. I had never done that before. But up to that point, we had been doing lots of things that helped me be able to take on that challenge. So, yeah, junior year.
So Bob, can you expand on the negative effects of growth mindset or situations where you've seen it fail?
Well, you know, I think people's conceptions of growth mindset is something that you give to somebody, and I know Professor Crosnoe, that's not what he's saying, that's not what we're trying to do. But I think the idea that Professor Crosnoe said about this not being a magic bullet is that, you know, if you just have the right attitude, things will get better because your attitude is good. I mean, attitude's important, but you actually have to do things that lead to successful outcomes. And when you're trying something new, in all likelihood, the first times you try it, aren't going to be entirely successful. So one of the things that sort of works against our changing the way we operate in the world is that we've come to habituate to certain ways of behaving that work reasonably well in most circumstances. And to step out of that takes some courage, and it takes a personal incentive that I want to go beyond what I'm doing right now. And I think that's central to what a growth mindset is about.
Okay. So thank you very much for coming. I want to challenge each of you to spend a little bit of time today and tonight reflecting on how you can think about the university experience in a way that can adapt to change, force yourself to think about how you can get more out of what you're doing, and embrace the fact that you may have to expand your boundaries past where you think they are, because that's the point of everything we're trying to do. Have a great evening.